On Christmas Day, my daughter gave me her gift with a sweet smile. Her husband's $400,000 debt. Dad, just sign it before New Year's. It's for the family. I smiled, signed it, and then gave them my gift. She opened the box and screamed so loudly that she almost fell over. You won't believe what was inside. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. The voice drifted through the crack in Regina's bedroom door, and I froze halfway up the stairs with a basket of laundry. No, seriously, Amber, it's perfect, my daughter said, that particular laugh in her voice that I hadn't heard since high school, the one she used when she'd gotten away with something clever. We present it as a gift, an opportunity for him to help family. Dad won't be able to say no. You know how he is about responsibility and all that crap. I set the basket down silently. My hands weren't shaking yet. That would come later. Justin's $400,000. Yeah, the whole thing. We frame it as him co-signing, but really we're transferring the liability. Dad's got the credit score, the house equity. Banks love guys like him. Stable, boring, predictable. She laughed again. He'll think he's being noble. The great Leonard Crawford saving his little girl one more time. The walls of my own house suddenly felt foreign. 42 years I'd worked in banking, catching fraudsters who played exactly these games. Pattern recognition, they called it, spotting the manipulation before it landed. And here I was, standing in my hallway, listening to my only daughter plot to hang a noose of debt around my neck and call it a Christmas present. By New Year's, we'll have the papers signed. Then we can breathe again. Maybe even that Cabo trip we wanted. Put it on his card while we're at it. Her voice dropped lower, conspiratorial. Honestly, he owes us. 3 years we've been temporarily living here. That's worth something, right? I picked up the laundry basket, walked back down the stairs. My reflection in the hallway mirror showed the same face as this morning. Gray hair, reading glasses hanging from my collar, the deep lines around my eyes that came from 4 decades of scrutinizing financial statements. But something behind those eyes had shifted, hardened. In the kitchen, I folded towels with mechanical precision. Regina came down 20 minutes later, all smiles. Dad, I didn't know you were home. Want some coffee? That'd be nice, honey. She moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, pulling out the expensive beans she'd bought last week, $40 a pound. For someone with no money, she sure knew how to spend it. Justin and I were thinking, we should do something special for Christmas this year, really make it memorable. She handed me a mug, her eyes bright with what I'd once thought was love. Now I saw it for what it was. Calculation. We have a surprise for you. A surprise? How thoughtful. She didn't catch the flatness in my tone. Why would she? In her mind, I was just Dad. Reliable. Pushover Dad, who'd never once told her no when it mattered. You're going to love it. It's very meaningful. I sipped the coffee. It was excellent, of course. Everything about their lifestyle was excellent. The question was, who was really paying for it? That evening I sat in my study, the one room in the house they rarely entered, probably because it lacked anything worth photographing for Instagram, and pulled out the albums. Regina at 8, gap-toothed and laughing at her birthday party, a week after her mother's funeral. Regina at 13, rolling her eyes at my jokes, but unable to hide her smile. Regina at 22, graduating college, hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. When had that girl disappeared? Or had she ever existed at all? My computer screen glowed in the darkness. 42 years as a bank auditor had taught me many things, but the most important was this. Follow the money. Always follow the money. Because money doesn't lie, even when people do. I opened a spreadsheet, started listing what I knew, what I'd observed but ignored because I'd wanted to believe in the daughter I'd raised alone. The new BMW Regina drove, $60,000 at least, the designer handbags that appeared monthly, Justin's vintage watch collection lining the dresser in the guest room they'd colonized, dinner receipts I'd glimpsed in the trash, $100 sushi, $200 steakhouses, all while claiming they were struggling, between opportunities, just needing a little more time. 3 years of little more time. $400,000 in debt, and they wanted me to carry it. Gift wrapped, like I should be grateful for the opportunity to ruin my retirement. The funny thing about being an auditor is that you develop a sixth sense. Numbers tell stories, and right now the numbers were screaming. Justin claimed his startup had failed, but failed startups don't fund BMW leases. Bankruptcy doesn't buy Tiffany bracelets or season tickets to the Bulls. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Account access logs. I'd set up the home network. I had every password. Financial statements they'd carelessly left in the printer. Credit card bills in the recycling bin. I'd ignored them before because I'd trusted my daughter. Trust. What a quaint concept. By midnight, I had enough to confirm what my gut had been whispering for months. Something was deeply, deliberately wrong with their financial picture. The debt was real enough. I found references to it in Justin's email, panicked exchanges with someone named Marcus about extending the timeline, and alternative arrangements. But the poverty was performance art. I leaned back in my chair, studying the photo on my desk. Regina, 5 years old, dressed as a princess for Halloween. I'd made that costume by hand, sitting up until 3 a.m., with a sewing machine I barely knew how to use, because store-bought wasn't good enough for my little girl. She'd hugged me that morning and said, "You're the best daddy in the whole world." The little girl in that photo wouldn't recognize the woman upstairs, plotting to financially ruin her father over coffee and conspiracy. But I recognized something else in that photo now. I recognized myself, the man I'd been, the man who devoted everything to raising her right, teaching her values, showing her what integrity meant. Time to remember who Leonard Crawford actually was. Not just a father, not just a retired banker, a professional fraud investigator who'd built a career on catching people who thought they were smarter than the system. If Regina and Justin wanted to play financial games with me, I'd be happy to teach them how professionals play. Sleep didn't come that night. Instead, memories did, uninvited and relentless. I remembered the hospital 30 years ago, the doctor's hand on my shoulder, his voice gentle as he destroyed my world. "I'm sorry, Mr. Crawford. We did everything we could." Regina was 8 years old, sitting in the waiting room with a coloring book, unaware that her mother was gone, unaware that our family had just fractured into something fragile and incomplete. I remembered walking into that waiting room, kneeling in front of my daughter, watching her face crumble as she understood what the tears in my eyes meant. "It's just you and me now, baby girl, but we're going to be okay, I promise." And we had been. I'd kept that promise, learned to braid hair by watching YouTube videos at midnight, attended every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game, even though my knees ached from sitting on those metal bleachers. I'd taught her to ride a bike, to drive a car, to balance a checkbook. I'd stayed up with her through heartbreaks and homework meltdowns. I'd paid for college without loans because I'd worked double shifts and saved every penny I could spare. Just you and me against the world. When had that stopped being enough? I traced the timeline in my head, watching the descent like an auditor reviewing a failing company's records. Regina's college graduation, bright-eyed and ambitious. Her first job at a marketing firm, modest but promising. Then Justin Morrison walked into her life at some networking event. Tall, confident, full of big ideas and bigger promises. Entrepreneur, he called himself. I called him something else, but I'd kept it to myself because Regina glowed when she talked about him. The wedding was small. Justin's idea. Intimate, he said. Cost-effective, I suspected. I'd paid for it anyway, given them a check for $10,000 as a wedding gift. "Start your life right," I told them. They'd started something, all right. First came the visit. "Just for a few weeks, Dad, while we look for the perfect place." Justin's startup was in a critical phase. Couldn't afford distractions like apartment hunting. I'd understood. Young couples needed support. Weeks became months. The guest room filled with their belongings. Their toothbrushes colonized the bathroom. Their groceries crowded my refrigerator. Expensive organic everything while I'd spent 40 years buying store brand. "We're so close to a breakthrough," Justin would say over breakfast, scrolling through his phone. "The investors are really interested. Just need a little more runway." 6 months became a year. Regina stopped talking about apartments, started talking about our house, like she'd always lived here. Justin's office calls echoed through the walls. Always promising, always optimistic, never actually closing deals. I'd raised concerns once. Just once. Regina's eyes had filled with tears. I thought you wanted to help us, Dad. I thought family mattered to you. Mom would have understood. That had shut me up. Because she knew, they both knew, that invoking her mother was the nuclear option, the thing I couldn't defend against, so I'd swallowed my doubts, watched them settle deeper into my home, my life, my routine, told myself it was temporary, told myself I was being supportive, told myself that good fathers don't keep score. But my auditor's brain had kept score anyway. It was automatic, instinctive. 3 years of casual observations accumulated into a damning ledger. Regina's shopping bags from Nordstrom, Saks, Neiman Marcus. Client meeting outfits, she called them, though her LinkedIn showed she'd been between positions for 8 months. Justin's elaborate coffee setup, a $2,000 espresso machine, essential for productivity. The weekend trips to Milwaukee, Madison, Minneapolis, always staying at boutique hotels. Networking, Justin explained. Building relationships. Building relationships on whose dime? I thought about the utilities I paid, the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance that covered their expensive belongings, along with mine. The groceries I bought while they contributed by occasionally picking up takeout, which they charged to cards I now suspected were maxed out. The pattern was obvious, had been obvious. I'd just been too proud to call my daughter a leech, too afraid of driving her away like I'd watched other fathers do, turning family gatherings into cold, formal obligations. I thought I was being generous. Turns out I was being a mark. The photo albums lay open on my desk. I flipped through them slowly. Regina's sweet 16 before her mother got sick. Regina's high school graduation. Her first day of college, waving from the dorm steps. Every picture showed the same thing. Us against the world. Team Crawford, somewhere between those photos. And now, the team had dissolved. She'd chosen sides, and I wasn't on hers anymore. My phone buzzed. A text from Regina. Breakfast tomorrow? Want to discuss our Christmas plans? Christmas plans? Right. The surprise. The meaningful gift. $400,000 of someone else's debt, wrapped up with a bow and my signature on the dotted line. I typed back, sounds good. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to watching you perform, I thought. Looking forward to seeing exactly how you plan to play this. Because that's what it was now. A play. A performance. My daughter had become an actress, and I'd been her audience for 3 years, applauding on cue, never looking behind the curtain. But I'd spent 42 years in banking. I'd investigated fraud for a living, caught embezzlers, money launderers, people who thought they could hide transactions in complex webs of shell corporations. I'd testified in court 17 times, never lost a case, and now Regina and Justin thought they could run a con on me. In my own house, with my own love for my daughter as the weapon. The amateur hour was almost insulting. I pulled up my computer again, opened a new document, started typing. Not a spreadsheet this time, a plan. If they wanted to give me a gift, I'd accept it graciously, study it carefully, understand every clause, every implication, every legal ramification, and then I'd give them a gift in return. Something memorable, something meaningful, something that would teach them exactly what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. 42 years of catching financial predators had taught me one fundamental truth. They always make mistakes, always leave trails, always underestimate the people they're trying to deceive. Regina and Justin were about to learn what happens when you underestimate a professional. My daughter wanted to play grown-up games with Daddy's money. Fine. But she'd never asked what kind of games I'd played at work, what kind of mind you needed to catch people who'd spent years perfecting their deceptions. Time for a family lesson in financial literacy, and the tuition was going to be steep. The next morning, I watched them from my study window. Regina and Justin loading shopping bags into her BMW, the one they couldn't afford but somehow maintained. Premium leather seats, the kind that cost extra. I'd set up my laptop to face the window. To anyone glancing in, I looked like a retiree checking email. In reality, I was running a different kind of audit, the kind I used to do when a bank executive's expense reports didn't match their declared income. Justin carried 3 bags from Whole Foods, organic everything, no doubt. I'd checked their contribution to household expenses last month, $200. My grocery bill for the same period, $800. The math didn't math, as Regina's generation liked to say. But the real education came from watching them when they didn't know I was watching. Did you see his face last night? Regina's voice carried through the open kitchen window. When I mentioned the surprise, he looked so hopeful. Justin's laugh, like a puppy waiting for a treat. God, I almost felt bad. Almost. She paused. You think he suspects anything? Leonard, please. The man still uses a checkbook. He probably thinks we're just going through a rough patch. I zoomed in on the computer screen. My network monitoring software showed their devices connected to my Wi-Fi. Every website, every login, every careless digital breadcrumb they'd left behind. They thought I was technologically illiterate. Funny assumption for a man who'd spent the last decade of his career catching cryptocurrency fraud. Over the next 3 days, I compiled what I'd privately started calling the Morrison File. It started with the obvious. Justin's LinkedIn profile claiming he was CEO of a consulting firm. I ran the business registration filed 2 years ago. 0 tax returns, 0 reported income. The company existed only on paper, a vanity card for networking events. Then Regina's credit cards. She'd been careful, I'd give her that. 3 cards under her maiden name. Total balances, $97,000. Minimum payments consistently late. Collection notices buried in her email, which she'd carelessly set to auto-forward to the family printer when she'd first moved in. I pulled one notice from my filing cabinet, a letter from Capital One dated 6 months ago. Your account is seriously past due. She'd printed it, crumpled it, thrown it in the recycling bin. I'd retrieved it during one of my trash consolidation routines. My forensic accountant instincts had saved it. Now it was evidence. But the real treasure came from Justin's laptop. He'd left it open on the kitchen counter while he showered. Just 15 minutes. That's all I needed. His email told a fascinating story. There was Marcus, apparently a former business partner, who'd been sending increasingly aggressive messages about the $400,000. You said you'd handle this, Jay. I'm not going to prison because you got greedy. Prison. Interesting word choice. I kept digging. Found spreadsheets Justin had created. Tracking expenses I recognized. Designer coffees. $3,000 annually. Gym memberships. $4,000. Regina's essential salon visits. $6,000. All while they'd been claiming poverty, asking me to cover utilities, insurance, property taxes. The financial literacy course was my favorite discovery. Building wealth after bankruptcy. 12 weeks, $800. Apparently Justin was taking expert advice on how to look broke while hiding assets. The irony was so thick I actually laughed out loud. My daughter's husband studying how to fake financial hardship while living rent-free in my house, preparing to dump his debt on me like a bag of flaming trash on a doorstep. I watched them that evening at dinner. Really watched, with the eyes of an investigator, not a father. Regina's performance was Oscar-worthy. Sighing over her phone, another rejection email. The job market is so brutal right now. She'd applied to exactly 3 positions in 6 months. I knew because I'd checked her LinkedIn activity. Meanwhile, her Instagram, which she'd foolishly not set to private, showed her at last week's Hamilton tickets. Orchestra seats, $300 each. We're trying so hard, Justin added, pushing food around his plate. But every time we get ahead, something knocks us back. Something being their unwillingness to live within their means. But I nodded sympathetically, played my part. I'm sure something will break your way soon, I said. Actually, Dad, we wanted to talk to you about that. Regina reached across the table, touching my hand. We've been thinking about Christmas. The surprise you mentioned? Exactly. We've been planning something that could really help all of us. A family investment, sort of. Family investment. Creative phrasing for, we're about to screw you. Sounds intriguing, I said, keeping my voice neutral. After they went upstairs, I returned to my study, pulled up the file I'd been building. $650,000 in total debt between them. That's what I'd uncovered so far. Justin's $400,000 was just the headline act. Regina's credit cards, Justin's personal loans, a car lease he'd defaulted on, 2 maxed out lines of credit. They weren't drowning. They were already underwater, frantically waving at me from the bottom of the pool, expecting me to jump in and drown with them. But here's what they'd missed in their careful calculations. I wasn't the soft touch they'd imagined. Kindness isn't weakness. Generosity isn't stupidity. And 42 years of catching financial criminals had taught me exactly how people rationalize theft from those who trust them. First rule, they always believe their own lies. Justin genuinely thought he was an entrepreneur, not a failure. Regina actually believed she deserved this lifestyle, that my money was somehow already hers. Second rule, they always underestimate their marks. They saw a grieving widower who'd spoil his only daughter. They missed the predator who'd built a career on pattern recognition and evidence gathering. Third rule, they always leave trails. Always. I opened a new document, started typing. Not a list this time, a timeline. Every lie, every manipulation, every false promise over 3 years. Dated, sourced, cross-referenced. By the time I finished, dawn was breaking over Evanston. My coffee had gone cold. My eyes burned. But I had something more valuable than sleep. I had the complete picture of their deception, and I was ready to start building my response. Margaret Stevens's law office sat in a restored brownstone in downtown Chicago, all dark wood and leather chairs that whispered old money and older wisdom. I'd found her through a former colleague who'd needed a ruthless divorce attorney. "If you want someone who plays by the rules but knows every loophole," he'd said, "Margaret's your fighter." "Mr. Crawford." She stood as I entered, mid-50s, steel gray suit, handshake like a vice grip. "Your voicemail was cryptic. I need to discuss a hypothetical situation." Her eyes narrowed slightly. In her profession, hypothetical meant definitely happening, but I need plausible deniability. "Of course. Please sit." I laid out the scenario. Changed no names. This wasn't actually hypothetical, and we both knew it. A daughter and son-in-law living in my home. Mounting evidence of financial deception, an incoming request to co-sign significant debt. Margaret listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes in precise handwriting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "How old are you, Mr. Crawford?" 67. "Then you need to know something. Illinois has strong laws regarding financial exploitation of elderly individuals. Anyone over 60 can claim protection under the Elder Abuse and Neglect Act. What you're describing, manipulation to assume debt under false pretenses, that's not just morally wrong, it's potentially criminal." "Criminal?" "Financial exploitation. If they're deliberately misrepresenting their financial situation to coerce you into taking on debt, that's fraud. Add in that you're over 60 and they're living in your home. A prosecutor could make a compelling case." I hadn't considered that angle. I'd been thinking civil law, property rights, contract obligations. Margaret saw something darker. "What would you need?" I asked. "To prove exploitation?" "Documentation. Evidence of their true financial state versus what they're claiming. Proof of intent to deceive. The more concrete, the better." "If someone had that evidence, hypothetically, what could they do with it?" Margaret smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who'd seen people try to play games with other people's lives and had learned to enjoy watching justice unfold. Hypothetically, they could protect themselves legally, change estate documents, establish eviction proceedings if necessary. And if they wanted to be really thorough, they could report suspected fraud to appropriate authorities. The IRS, for instance, takes a very dim view of hidden assets during debt negotiations. We talked for another hour. By the time I left, I had a roadmap, not just for protecting myself, for ensuring that Regina and Justin faced actual consequences for their choices. 3 days later, I met Darlene Parker at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. My contact at the bank had recommended her. "Best financial investigator I know. If there's money hidden, she'll find it." Darlene was younger than I expected, early 40s, dressed like she was heading to a CrossFit class, laptop bag covered in travel stickers. She ordered an espresso that could have stripped paint. "Your son-in-law sounds like a piece of work," she said after I'd outlined the situation. "Not my son-in-law. My daughter's problem." She grinned. "I like you already." "Okay, here's what I can do. 3 days, full financial workup. I'll need names, dates of birth, social security numbers if you have them." "Would it be legal for me to provide that information?" "You're the homeowner. They're living in your house. You have legitimate concern about their financial stability affecting your property. Plus, Illinois is funny about elder financial exploitation. People in your age bracket get certain protections. She sipped her espresso. I'm not saying you should provide the information. I'm saying if you did, I'd know how to use it legally. I slid a folder across the table. Everything she needed, neatly typed. Darlene worked fast. 2 days later, my phone rang. Mr. Crawford, I need you to sit down for this. I was already in my study. Door locked. Go ahead. Your son-in-law is hiding about $165,000 in accessible assets. $50,000 in a startup, his buddy Marcus's crypto venture. $35,000 in an offshore account, probably set up when he thought he was going to be the next tech billionaire. And here's the interesting part. He sold his stake in a sports memorabilia business for $80,000. 2 months ago. Hasn't declared it anywhere. $80,000. I wrote the number down, while claiming bankruptcy. Gets better. Your daughter has been opening credit cards under her maiden name. Might be technically legal, but the banks don't know she's married. That affects credit evaluation. And those cards, she's defaulting strategically, making minimum payments just enough to avoid lawsuits, but never actually reducing the principal. How much total? Between both of them? You were right about the $650 total. But here's what matters. They have the means to cover a significant chunk. They're just choosing not to. After she hung up, I sat in my study for a long time. Not angry anymore. Past anger. This was something colder, more focused. They weren't desperate people making mistakes. They were con artists running a long game. And their mark was the man who'd raised one of them, loved her unconditionally, given her every advantage he could afford. I opened my laptop, created a new folder, named it Christmas Gift. Inside, I started drafting. A comprehensive analysis of the Morrison family financial situation. Charts showing income versus expenditure. Graphs comparing claimed poverty against actual spending. A timeline of lies. Every "we're so broke" conversation matched against credit card statements showing luxury purchases. I worked like I was preparing for a board presentation, because in a way I was. The board just happened to consist of my daughter and her husband, and the agenda item was the consequences of treating family like a mark. Margaret had given me the legal framework. Darlene had given me the ammunition. Now I just needed the delivery mechanism, and I knew exactly when that would be. Christmas Eve, when they planned to gift me their debt, all wrapped up with false tears and manipulated guilt. I'd have a gift for them, too. My computer screen glowed in the darkness. I pulled up one more file, the recording I'd made of Regina's phone conversation, the one where she'd called me predictable, where Justin had laughed about me being naive. I listened to it again, not because it hurt anymore, because it clarified things. She'd made her choice, chosen a man who saw her father as a resource to exploit, chosen wealth over integrity, chosen comfortable lies over difficult truths. Fine. Every choice has consequences. Mine was about to have Christmas wrapping. Darlene's final report arrived on December 16th. 47 pages of meticulously documented financial fraud. I read it twice, making notes in the margins like I was reviewing a loan application, which in a way I was. Except this time, the answer was going to be a very satisfying denied. I called Ted Wilson that afternoon. We'd worked together at the bank for 15 years before he'd retired to open his notary practice. If anyone could make documents bulletproof, it was Ted. "Leonard Crawford," he said when he picked up, warmth in his voice. "Haven't heard from you in months. How's retirement treating you?" "Complicated. Ted, I need your help with something sensitive." "Sensitive how?" "Family matter, legal documents. Everything needs to be airtight." There was a pause. Ted had been around long enough to read between lines. "Your daughter?" "Her and her husband. Can we meet?" We met at his office the next day. I brought everything. Darlene's report, Margaret's legal outlines, my own compiled evidence, spread it across his conference table like a prosecution laying out a case. Ted whistled low. "They really thought they could run this on you? They think I'm a soft touch. Grieving widower, doting father, all that. Are you?" He looked at me over his reading glasses. "A soft touch?" I thought about Regina at 8 years old, crying in my arms after her mother's funeral. Thought about her at 18, hugging me at graduation. Then I thought about her laughing on the phone with Amber, calling me predictable. Not anymore. Ted nodded slowly. "What do you need?" Everything Margaret outlined. Eviction notice, power of attorney revocations, will amendments. And I want one more thing. I slid a handwritten outline across the table. A formal financial audit. Professional format, notarized. The kind banks use when investigating fraud. The Morrison family financial analysis. Complete with charts, graphs, projections of their debt-to-income ratio, comparison of claimed versus actual spending. I want it to look like what it is, an official investigation. Ted grinned. It was the same grin he'd worn when we'd caught that VP embezzling back in 2008. You want to bury them in their own paperwork? I want them to see exactly how I see them, through the lens of 42 years of professional skepticism. It took 3 days. Margaret prepared the legal documents with surgical precision. Ted notarized everything, his stamp, making each page official and irreversible. I compiled the financial analysis myself, working late into each night, finding a strange satisfaction in the methodical destruction of their facade. The graphs were particularly damning. One showed their claimed income versus actual expenditures over 3 years. The gap was a canyon. Another tracked Regina's Instagram posts, geotagged at expensive restaurants, luxury stores, spa retreats, against her stated unemployment. A third compared Justin's LinkedIn claims of business success against his actual reported income. 0. I added footnotes. Professional, clinical, devastating. Under a photo of Regina's new designer handbag. Estimated retail value, $2,400. Date of purchase, November 15th, 2024. 2 weeks after claiming we can barely afford groceries. Dark humor? Maybe. But after 3 years of being played for a fool, I'd earned some satisfaction. On December 20th, I bought a gift box. Nothing cheap. Elegant red cardboard with gold trim. The kind you'd put an expensive present in. Found it at a specialty shop downtown. The woman behind the counter smiled. Someone special? Very special, I said. At home, I arranged everything carefully. Darlene's report on the bottom. Substantial and official. Margaret's legal documents next, each with bright yellow tabs marking where signatures would be required, if they were getting signatures, which they weren't. The eviction notice, the power of attorney revocations, the will amendment, establishing a charitable trust that would benefit everyone except my daughter unless she could prove 5 years of financial responsibility. On top, I placed the Morrison family financial analysis, my masterpiece. 47 pages of their lies, cross-referenced and annotated. The cover page looked like something from a Fortune 500 boardroom. Comprehensive financial investigation, Morrison Family Unit, prepared by Leonard Crawford, Senior Bank Auditor, retired, December 2024. And then, because I couldn't help myself, I added the finishing touches. A toy calculator from the dollar store. Bright plastic, the kind you'd give a child learning arithmetic. And a book I'd found at a used bookstore. My First Million Teaching Kids About Money, published in 1997, with cartoon illustrations of smiling piggy banks. I tucked them on top, wrapped the whole thing in tissue paper, tied it with a red silk ribbon. Regina and Justin's gift to me was going to be $400,000 of debt disguised as family obligation. My gift to them was going to be the truth, wrapped in irony and sealed with legal consequences. I stored the box in my study closet, behind old tax returns where neither of them would think to look. Every time I passed that closet over the next 3 days, I felt a small smile. Not satisfaction yet. That would come later. This was anticipation. The feeling a chess player gets when they see checkmate forming, 3 moves ahead. They thought they knew how this game ended. They thought they'd written the script. Desperate daughter, loving father, inevitable rescue. But they'd forgotten something crucial. They'd forgotten that I'd spent 4 decades studying how people tried to cheat systems, how they rationalized theft, how they always underestimated the person they were trying to con. December 23rd arrived cold and clear. Christmas music played on the radio. The house smelled like Regina's expensive pumpkin candles, purchased no doubt with credit she had no intention of paying back. I went to my study one last time before dinner, looked at the photos on my desk. Regina through the years, smiling at the camera, trusting that her father would always be there to catch her. I'd always believed I was raising her to be independent, strong, capable of standing on her own. Turned out I'd accidentally raised someone who thought standing on someone else was easier. Time to correct that lesson. I picked up the gift box, felt its satisfying weight, carried it downstairs and tucked it under the Christmas tree, hidden behind the larger presents they'd arranged, probably empty boxes for show. Tonight, they were going to ask me to shoulder their burden, and I was going to give them mine. The dinner table looked like something from a magazine spread. Regina had outdone herself. Candles, cloth napkins, the good china we usually only used for Thanksgiving. Festive and warm and completely artificial, like a stage set for a play about happy families. Justin carved the roast, I'd paid for that too, I noted, with theatrical precision. "This is nice," he said, smiling at Regina. "Having a real family dinner. Feels like the old days." "What old days? The ones where they moved in temporarily and never left?" But I kept my face neutral, playing my part. "It's lovely," I agreed. "Regina, you've really made everything special." She beamed, reached across to squeeze my hand. "You deserve it, Dad. After everything you've done for us." The irony was so thick I could taste it. Everything I'd done for them included providing free housing, paying utilities, covering property taxes, buying groceries they supplemented with luxury items charged to hidden credit cards. But sure, I deserved a nice dinner. We made it through the meal with pleasant small talk, weather, sports, carefully avoiding any mention of jobs, money, or the future. I watched them exchange glances, little nods of coordination. They'd rehearsed this, probably spent hours planning the perfect approach. Finally, as Regina served coffee, expensive beans naturally, Justin cleared his throat. "Leonard, Regina and I wanted to talk to you about something important." "Here we go." "We've been thinking a lot about family," Regina added, her voice taking on that earnest quality she'd perfected. "About what it means to be there for each other." I sipped my coffee, said nothing. Let them work for it. "Things have been rough lately," Justin continued. "I won't lie to you. My business ventures haven't panned out the way I'd hoped, and the market's been brutal." The market, as if external economic forces were responsible for his string of failures, rather than his own incompetence and unwillingness to work a regular job. "We've tried everything," Regina's eyes were getting misty. "Right on schedule. Every possible option, but we've hit a wall, and we're running out of time." "What kind of wall?" I asked, keeping my tone concerned. Justin reached under his chair, pulling out a leather folder, set it on the table between us like he was presenting a peace treaty. "I have some outstanding debts, business loans that are coming due. The creditor is getting aggressive, and if we don't resolve this soon, there could be serious consequences." "How serious?" "Legal action, possibly liens. It could affect our credit for years, maybe even impact our ability to rent an apartment or get jobs." "Oh, the jobs you don't actually have," I thought, but I nodded gravely. "Dad," Regina's voice cracked. A single tear rolled down her cheek. I had to admit, she'd practiced. "We've been so ashamed. We didn't want to burden you, but you're all we have. You're the only person who's ever really been there for us." "How much are we talking about?" I asked, even though I knew to the penny. 400,000, Justin said. He had the decency to look down when he said it. "It sounds like a lot, but with your house equity and credit rating, you could co-sign a consolidation loan. We'd pay it back, obviously. This would just buy us time to get back on our feet." "Get back on your feet." I repeated the phrase slowly, tasting each word. "How long have you been trying to get on your feet, exactly?" "Dad, 3 years? Living in my house, rent-free, while I covered your expenses and you accumulated—" I paused, letting the silence stretch. 400,000 in debt?" Justin's smile faltered. "It's more complicated than that. The economy, timing, unexpected setbacks." "I'm sure it is complicated." I set down my coffee cup. "Regina, when was the last time you actually applied for a job?" Her eyes widened. "I've been applying. The market is 3 positions in 6 months. I checked your LinkedIn." The color drained from her face. Justin jumped in. "Leonard, we're not here to be interrogated. We're family. We're asking for help." "No," I said quietly. "You're asking me to take on your debt, to absorb the consequences of your choices. There's a difference. Dad, please, let me see the paperwork." Justin hesitated, then slid the folder across. I opened it. Loan documents neatly prepared. All they needed was my signature. I scanned the terms, the interest rates, the payment schedule. Professionally done. They'd put real effort into this trap. You've thought of everything, I said. We just need you to sign by New Year's Eve, Regina said, hope creeping into her voice. Then we can start fresh. A new year. A new beginning. A new beginning. I closed the folder, pushed it aside. Actually, I had a similar thought. About fresh starts. I stood up, walked to the Christmas tree, retrieved the red gift box from behind the decorative presents, carried it back to the table. What's that? Regina asked. Your surprise mentioned wanting to make this Christmas meaningful. Exchange gifts that mattered. I set the box down. I agreed. So I prepared something for both of you. Consider it my response to your proposal. Justin's brow furrowed, but Regina was already smiling, maybe thinking I'd folded, that I was presenting my agreement in some sentimental way. Justin reached for the box, pulling off the ribbon. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, he found the toy calculator first. His hand froze, face going from confusion to something darker. He lifted it out slowly, like it might bite him. What is this? Keep looking, I said pleasantly. There's more. Regina pulled out the children's book. My First Million, Teaching Kids About Money. She stared at the cartoon piggy bank on the cover, color rising in her cheeks. Dad, I don't understand. Keep going. Justin's hands shook slightly as he moved the tissue paper aside, found the first document, began reading the title aloud, his voice getting quieter with each word. Comprehensive Financial Investigation, Morrison Family Unit. The room went silent except for the Christmas music still playing softly from the living room, some choir singing about peace on earth. Regina grabbed the document, scanning the first page. I watched her face cycle through emotions. Confusion, disbelief, recognition, horror. Her hands started trembling. You investigated us. Her voice came out small, broken. I audited you, I corrected. There's a difference. Investigation implies suspicion. Audit means I had evidence and wanted to verify its scope. Justin was flipping pages now, seeing his hidden assets laid out in neat columns. The offshore account, the startup stake, the undeclared business sale. His face had gone the color of day-old oatmeal. This is, he started, then stopped. Started again. You can't just... Page 15 is particularly interesting, I said conversationally. That's where I detail your claimed bankruptcy against your actual hidden assets. $165,000, give or take. Funny thing to forget about when you're asking your father-in-law to absorb $400,000 in debt. Regina was crying now. Real tears, not the performative ones from earlier. You spied on us, invaded our privacy. I lived in my own house and observed what you carelessly left visible. There's a legal distinction. I gestured to the box. But there's more. The really good stuff is underneath. Justin's hands were trembling now as he pulled out the next layer of documents. The eviction notice sat on top, official and irrevocable, with Margaret's firm's letterhead making it absolutely legal. Notice of termination of tenancy, he read aloud, his voice cracking. You're kicking us out. 90 days, as Illinois law requires. You have until March 24th, 2025 to vacate the premises. That's more than fair, considering you've been living here rent-free for 3 years. Regina snatched the paper from him, scanning it frantically. Dad, you can't do this. This is our home. My home, I corrected gently, which I've generously shared while you accumulated $650,000 in debt and hid $165,000 in assets. Keep reading. There's more. They dug deeper, found the power of attorney revocations. Regina had been able to access my medical records, make certain financial decisions in emergencies. Not anymore. Found the will amendment, establishing a charitable trust. Regina's face went white as she read the conditions. A trust? You're leaving everything to charity? Not quite. Read the fine print. You can access the trust after 5 years of documented financial responsibility, steady employment, debt repayment, no hidden accounts, full transparency. I leaned back in my chair. Basically, you have to become an actual adult. This is insane. Justin was on his feet now, pacing. You can't disinherit your own daughter because we hit a rough patch. Rough patch? I laughed, and it came out sharp and cold. A rough patch is losing a job. A rough patch is unexpected medical bills. What you two have been doing is systematic financial fraud while living in my house, eating my food, using my utilities, and planning to saddle me with $400,000 of your debt as a Christmas present. The room went silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Regina's eyes were swimming with tears, real ones this time, not the calculated variety from earlier. When did you... December 10th, I said. I was bringing up laundry. Your bedroom door was cracked. I heard you on the phone with Amber laughing about the perfect plan, about how your predictable old dad would never say no, how I was basically a checkbook with sentimental weaknesses. Her face crumbled. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. I pulled out my phone, opened a file, turned the volume up. My voice came through the speaker, then Regina's, crystal clear. We present it as a gift, an opportunity for him to help family. Dad won't be able to say no. You know how he is about responsibility and all that crap. I let it play. Let them hear Justin's voice. He'll think he's being noble. The great Leonard Crawford saving his little girl one more time. And Regina again. Honestly, he owes us. 3 years we've been temporarily living here. That's worth something, right? I stopped the recording. Illinois is a one-party consent state for recordings in private residences. Everything I collected is perfectly legal. Want to hear more? I have 17 separate conversations documenting your plans. Justin sat down heavily, all the color gone from his face. You've been recording us for 2 weeks? 13 days, to be precise. Once I knew what you were planning, I made sure I had documentation. Old habit from the bank. Always get everything in writing. Or in this case, in audio. Regina was openly sobbing now. Daddy, please! I know we made mistakes, but... Mistakes? I opened the financial analysis, flipped to a specific page. This is a mistake. I pointed to a line item. 1 overdraft fee because you weren't paying attention. This, I gestured to the entire document, is a pattern. 3 years of deliberate deception, strategic debt accumulation, and planned exploitation. We were going to pay you back, Justin tried, but even he didn't sound convinced. With what money? Your hidden 165? The money you've been carefully concealing while crying poverty? I pulled out another section of Darlene's report. Your offshore account in the Caymans, $35,000. Your stake in Marcus's crypto startup, $50,000. The $80,000 you got from selling your share of Sports Vault collectibles 2 months ago. Where is that money, Justin? He couldn't answer, just stared at the papers like they might spontaneously combust and save him. You see, that's the thing about being a bank auditor for 42 years. You learn to spot patterns, hidden assets, strategic bankruptcy claims, attempts to manipulate family members into assuming debt. I've seen it all, investigated it all, testified about it in court 17 times. I met his eyes. I never lost a case. This isn't court, Regina whispered. Not yet, I agreed. But there's one more document in the box you haven't found yet. Bottom right corner. Justin's hand shook as he pulled it out. Notice of suspected financial fraud to the Internal Revenue Service, he read aloud. You reported us to the IRS? I reported unreported income, hidden assets, and potential tax evasion. They'll investigate. And if they find what Darlene found, and they will, they're very thorough, you'll face audits, penalties, possibly criminal charges. I paused. Though I suppose you could use that financial literacy course you've been taking. Building Wealth After Bankruptcy. Ironic title, given the circumstances. Regina looked up sharply. You knew about that too? I know everything. Every purchase, every lie, every calculated manipulation. That's what I've been doing for 13 days while you two rehearsed your Christmas sob story. I was building a case. I gestured to the box. And there it is. 47 pages of your choices, consequences included. The grandfather clock chimed 9. Christmas music still played faintly from the living room. Silent night, holy night. All is calm, all is bright. Except nothing was calm in this dining room. Nothing was bright in their futures. Justin stood up, hands balled into fists. You can't do this. You're destroying your own daughter over money. No, I said quietly. You're destroying yourselves. I'm just documenting it and ensuring I don't go down with you. Regina looked at me, mascara running, voice broken. What happened to you? When did you become so cold? I thought about that, really considered it. December 10th, I said finally. The moment I heard my daughter laugh about manipulating me. The moment I realized you weren't asking for help. You were running a con. On your own father. In his own house. I stood up, began gathering the documents. I raised you better than this, Regina. Your mother would be ashamed. It was a low blow. I knew it. But it was also true. Get out, Regina said, voice venomous. If you hate us so much, get out. This is my house, I reminded her. But don't worry. You have 90 days to find accommodations. I suggest you use some of that hidden 165 to secure a deposit. I left them sitting there, surrounded by the ruins of their plan, holding their Christmas gift of consequences. In my study, I poured myself 2 fingers of scotch. My hands were steady. My conscience was clear. They'd wanted to give me their burden. I'd given them the truth. Fair trade. The next morning, Christmas Eve, I woke to raised voices downstairs. I took my time getting ready, brushing my teeth, making coffee. Let them stew. Let them plan. I'd already anticipated every move they might make. When I came down, they were waiting in the kitchen. Regina's eyes were red, but determined. Justin looked like he hadn't slept, jaw tight with suppressed rage. "We need to talk," Regina said. "All right." She took a breath, shifted tactics. This was the approach I'd expected first, emotional manipulation. "Dad, I know last night was a lot, but I need you to understand something. Everything we did, every choice we made, it wasn't about hurting you. We were desperate." "Desperate people don't buy $1,000 handbags. That was before. 2 weeks ago, Regina. Your Instagram shows it. Date stamp and everything." She flinched, regrouped. "Fine, we made mistakes. But you raised me, Dad. You know me. I'm not a bad person. Neither is Justin. We got in over our heads. And instead of coming to me honestly, you decided to trick me into co-signing debt while hiding assets. That's not desperation. That's fraud." "That's a harsh word," Justin interjected. He'd found his voice again, and it had an edge. "And it's one you might want to reconsider using." "Is that a threat?" "It's a reality check. You investigated us. Fine. But you did it by accessing our private computers, our emails, our accounts, without permission. That's a legal search and seizure. We could sue you for invasion of privacy." I sipped my coffee. "You could try. Illinois law is pretty clear about homeowners' rights regarding devices connected to their network. You signed an acceptable use policy when you set up your laptops here 3 years ago. Remember? It was part of my insurance requirement. I hadn't required any such thing, but they'd been too careless to remember what they'd signed. Plus, anything left in common areas of the house is fair game. You left documents on the kitchen counter, in the printer, in the recycling bin." Justin's jaw worked. He wasn't used to people being more prepared than him. "Even if that's true," he pressed, "you can't just report us to the IRS based on speculation. That's harassment. Malicious prosecution." I reported suspected tax fraud based on documented evidence gathered by a licensed financial investigator. The IRS will make their own determination. If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about. I set down my coffee cup. "But we both know that's not the case." Regina tried again, voice cracking. "What about family, Dad? What about forgiveness? All those years you raised me? All those lessons about love and loyalty? Were they meaningless?" "Not meaningless. Just apparently wasted on you." It hurt to say, but it was true. I taught you about responsibility, integrity, earning what you have. You learned something else entirely." "From who?" She was getting angry now, defensive. "From you. You're the one who taught me that money solves everything. Every problem I had growing up, you threw money at it. Dance lessons, college, my wedding. I gave you opportunities," I corrected. "I never taught you to steal. And that's what you were trying to do. Steal my financial stability, my retirement security, my equity. You just wanted to call it helping families so you could sleep at night." Justin stood abruptly. "You know what? Fine. You want to play hardball? We'll get a lawyer. Challenge the eviction. Challenge the recording. Challenge everything. Good luck finding one who'll take your case when you can't pay the retainer." His face went red. "We'll figure it out. With your hidden assets? Go ahead. Spend that 165 on legal fees. Watch how fast it disappears. And then the IRS will come asking where you got it. since you never declared it. I smiled. Either way, I win. The doorbell rang. Perfect timing. That'll be Margaret Stevens, I said. I asked her to drop by this morning. Thought you might try something like this. Margaret entered with her briefcase and professional composure. Good morning, everyone. Leonard mentioned you might have questions about the legal documents. How convenient, Justin sneered. You called your lawyer. I called my attorney, I corrected. There's a difference. Margaret, they're threatening to challenge the eviction and claim my investigation was illegal. Margaret set her briefcase down, pulled out a folder. Mr. Morrison, Mrs. Morrison, let me be very clear. Everything Leonard has done is entirely within Illinois law. The eviction notice provides 90 days, exceeding the minimum requirement. The financial investigation was conducted by a licensed professional, using publicly accessible records and information obtained legally within Leonard's home. The recordings were made in Leonard's private residence under one-party consent laws. What about elder exploitation? Regina jumped on that. We could claim he's being manipulated, that he's not thinking clearly. You could, Margaret agreed. But elder exploitation laws in Illinois are designed to protect seniors from financial abuse. Given the documentation Leonard has of your attempts to manipulate him into assuming significant debt while concealing assets, such a claim would backfire spectacularly. In fact, you'd be making the prosecutor's case for them. Justin and Regina exchanged glances. Their weapons were being turned against them one by one. This isn't over, Justin said, voice low and threatening. No, I agreed. It's not. You have 87 days left. I suggest you start packing. The next few days were fascinating to watch. Christmas passed in cold silence. Regina and Justin stayed in their room mostly, emerging only for tense, whispered conversations in the kitchen. I kept to my study, working, reading, maintaining my routine. On the 26th, I received a call from Margaret. Leonard, you should know. Justin's creditors just contacted me. They received copies of your financial investigation, the ones showing his hidden assets. Did they now? I sipped my coffee. How did that happen? You already know how. Her voice carried approval. They're filing to seize those assets. The offshore account, the crypto stake, everything. He can't hide anymore. Seems fair. They're owed money after all. That afternoon, I heard Justin on the phone in the living room. His voice carried raw with desperation. Marcus, they know about the crypto fund. They know about everything. No, I don't know how they found out. Yes, Leonard's attorney. We need to move it now before they freeze it. Too late for that. Margaret had already coordinated with the creditors. By the time Justin tried to transfer anything, it would all be locked down. The 27th brought more entertainment. I was in the kitchen making lunch when Regina burst in, her phone clutched in her hand, face blotchy from crying. They closed my credit cards, all of them, and my bank is demanding full payment immediately. Which bank? Chase, Capital One, all of them. She shoved the phone at me. They're saying I committed fraud by not disclosing my marital status. But I didn't. I used my maiden name. That's legal. It's legal to use your maiden name, I agreed. It's not legal to deliberately conceal your marital status, to manipulate credit evaluations, especially when your husband has $650,000 in debt. Banks consider that material information. You told them. It wasn't a question. You called my banks and told them. Margaret's office sent formal notifications, yes. As part of documenting your financial situation, banks have a right to know if their risk assessment was based on incomplete information. This is insane. She was shaking now, phone still thrust at me like a weapon. You're destroying us. Actually destroying us. Over money. Over $400,000 that you could easily afford. $650,000, I corrected. And it's not about the money, Regina. It's about you trying to rob me. Your own father. The man who raised you, who sacrificed for you, who loved you unconditionally. I set down my sandwich. You didn't ask for help. You plotted to trap me. There's a difference. Justin appeared in the doorway. We need to talk, all of us, now. We're talking. No. His face was haggard, desperate. We need to negotiate. There has to be a way out of this. You can't destroy your own family like this. I'm not destroying anything. I'm removing myself from your destruction. There's a difference. But I followed them to the living room. We sat, them on the couch, me in my chair. The same furniture where we'd shared 3 years of meals, conversations, the performance of family. Now it felt like a courtroom. "We'll leave," Justin said, voluntarily, before the 90 days. "We'll go next week. Just call off the dogs. Tell the IRS you made a mistake. Tell the creditors you were wrong about the assets." But I wasn't wrong. "Leonard, please," Regina's voice cracked. "We made mistakes. We were wrong. We admit it. But you're taking this too far. The IRS? Really? We could go to prison. Only if you committed crimes. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You hid income. You concealed assets while claiming poverty. You attempted to defraud me, your banks, your creditors. These are crimes, Regina. They have consequences." "We're your family," she whispered. "You stopped being my family when you decided I was an ATM with sentimental weaknesses." I leaned forward. "Do you want to know the worst part? I would have helped you. If you'd come to me honestly, admitted your mistakes, asked for help, I would have worked something out. Payment plan, consolidation loan, something. I'm not a monster." "Then why are you doing this?" Tears streamed down her face. Real ones, finally. The kind that came from actual grief rather than manipulation. Because you never gave me that chance. You chose deception over honesty. You chose to see me as a mark rather than as your father. You made that choice, Regina, not me. I stood up. "You have 84 days left. I suggest you start planning your exit." That night, I sat in my study and listened to them fight through the walls. Accusations, blame, panic. The perfect facade crumbling in real time. Justin's voice. "This is your father. Fix this." Regina's. "How? He has everything documented. Everything." Then we sue him. Emotional distress, elder abuse, something. With what money? And Margaret already said that would backfire. Silence. Then breaking glass. Something thrown against a wall. I poured another scotch. Watched the Chicago skyline through my window. Lights twinkling in the winter darkness. Margaret was right. This was fascinating to watch. Not satisfying exactly. There was too much loss for satisfaction, but just. Definitely just. My phone buzzed. Text from Margaret. "IRS formally opened investigation. They're very interested in the undeclared business sale. Thought you'd want to know." I typed back. "Thank you." Another text, this time from Ted. "Heard through the grapevine about your situation. Coffee sometime? Want to make sure you're okay." "I'm fine," I replied. "Coffee sounds good. January?" "You got it." Downstairs, the fighting continued. But up here in my study, surrounded by 42 years of career achievements and memories of a daughter who no longer existed, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not happiness. Not triumph. Just peace. Justice had a bitter taste, but it was still justice. New Year's Eve arrived cold and bright. Regina and Justin had barely spoken to me in 4 days. They'd found an apartment in Rogers Park. Cheaper neighborhood, much smaller space. I'd overheard Justin on the phone negotiating with his friend Marcus to crash there temporarily until the heat dies down. The heat wasn't going to die down, but I didn't tell them that. I spent the morning in my study while they packed. Boxes appeared in the hallway. Furniture got marked with tape. Their expensive belongings suddenly looked shabby in daylight, all flash, no substance, like their entire lives. Around noon, Regina knocked on my door. "Come in." She stood in the doorway, not entering. Her eyes were red but dry. She'd run out of tears, apparently. "We're leaving today. Justin found someone with a truck." "Before the 31st? That's earlier than I expected. We can't stay here anymore. Not with—" She gestured vaguely. "Everything." "I understand." "Do you?" Her voice hardened. "Do you understand that you've destroyed us? That we're going to lose everything because you couldn't forgive one mistake?" "It wasn't one mistake, Regina. It was 3 years of calculated deception culminating in attempted fraud." I kept my voice level. "And you're not losing everything. You're losing access to my money. There's a difference." "What about the will? The trust?" "Still in place. 5 years of documented financial responsibility, steady employment, debt repayment, then you can access it." 5 years? She laughed bitterly. "You know that's impossible." "Is it? Get a job, budget, pay your debts. Millions of people do it every day." "We're not millions of people. We're your family." "Were," I met her eyes, Past tense. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Good. Maybe it would finally penetrate. I'll never forgive you for this, she said quietly. I can live with that. Can you live with what you tried to do to me? No answer. She turned and left. 2 hours later, I stood at my study window, watching them load boxes into a rental truck. Justin moved with aggressive efficiency, throwing things rather than placing them. Regina worked slowly, mechanically, like a puppet with cut strings. She looked up once, saw me in the window. Our eyes met. I didn't wave, didn't smile. Just held her gaze until she looked away. Then they were done. The truck loaded. Justin climbed into the cab. Regina walked toward the house one last time. I thought she might come to the door, might try one final appeal. Instead, she just stood on the walkway, looking at the house. Her home for 3 years. The place she'd colonized, exploited, taken for granted. I went downstairs, opened the front door. Regina, she turned. Hope flickered in her eyes. You wanted to play adult financial games. I showed you how it's done professionally. I paused. The only difference is I played honestly. The hope died. Her face went blank. Goodbye, Dad. Goodbye, Regina. She walked to the truck, climbed in. They drove away. I stood on the porch watching until the truck disappeared around the corner. Then I went inside, locked the door, and walked through the suddenly empty house. Their bedroom looked ransacked. Drawers open, trash on the floor, a broken lamp in the corner. I'd have to clean all this, repaint, exorcise the ghosts. In the living room, their gift still sat on the coffee table. The loan documents. $400,000 of debt they'd tried to hang around my neck. I picked up the papers, carried them to my study, fed them into the shredder, page by page, watched the strips fall into the bin. That night, I called Ted. Hey, Leonard, how'd it go? They're gone, left this afternoon. How are you feeling? I considered that. Lighter, sadder, but lighter. That's normal. You did the right thing. Did I? I looked around my empty house. Sometimes I wonder. Don't. I've seen the documentation. They were robbing you blind, Leonard. You just refused to be robbed. That's not cruelty. That's self-preservation. Maybe. Definitely. Now listen, Sarah and I are having people over tomorrow night. New Year's Day. Come by. You shouldn't be alone. I'm not sure. Not asking. Telling. 7 o'clock. Bring wine if you want, but mainly just bring yourself. I smiled despite everything. All right. Thank you, Ted. After we hung up, I sat at my desk, pulled out my phone, found the financial analysis I'd created. 47 pages of their deception, meticulously documented. I didn't delete it. Evidence had to be preserved, especially with the IRS investigation ongoing. But I did archive it, moving it into a folder labeled Closed Cases, because that's what this was now. A closed case. The investigation complete, the verdict rendered, the sentence served. My phone buzzed. Email from Margaret. IRS agent called. They're very impressed with your documentation, said it's the most thorough civilian financial analysis they've seen. Investigation proceeding on multiple fronts. FYI, they may want to interview you formally. We'll keep you posted. Also, you did good, Leonard. Really good. Proud to know you. M, I typed back. Thank you for everything. At midnight, I stood at my window watching fireworks over the lake. The city celebrated, strangers cheering the new year. Fresh starts, new beginnings, all that optimistic nonsense. But maybe they had a point. I was 67 years old, retired, alone, but also free, financially secure. No parasites, no manipulation, no performance of family where none existed. My phone buzzed again. Ted. Sarah says bring your appetite. She's making her famous lasagna. See you tomorrow. I smiled. Typed, looking forward to it. Below me, Chicago glittered in the winter darkness. Somewhere out there, Regina and Justin were learning what consequences felt like, what accountability meant, what it cost to betray the people who loved you. I hoped they learned the lesson. I really did. But whether they did or not, it wasn't my problem anymore. I'd raised my daughter to be independent, strong, capable. Time to see if any of those lessons actually stuck. As for me, life after 67 was just beginning, and this time I was choosing who got to be part of it. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.